Another thing I'd like to talk about is Lehi's dream. This is not a dream that someone from upstate New York can concoct. Okay, this is a dream which fits in the desert. And it fits with desert travel. When it opens, Lehi finds himself in this dark, dreary waste. And there's a man who approaches him, a guide, who asks him to follow him. So off they go. They go off into the darkness. And after a while, Lehi complains, this is real long. It's a long trek. My gosh, we've been walking for hours and so on. And then comes the dawn. There has to be a dawn in this story because he sees himself in a field. And a field is different from the desert, the sand, the dunes, okay, and the rocks. So at the dawn, he finds himself in a field. But a field presumes water. In a desert, water comes either by seasonal rains, or you have to figure out a way to hold on to it. He and his family, the traveling party, later on will run into people who know about the Marib Dam. It's already under construction by the time they pass through there. This is a dam which catches the rain, the seasonal rains, and stores them. And through sluices on either side of the dam, the water is let out gradually and is carried by canals and channels up to 22 kilometers away, creating basically a green, verdant oasis right next to the sand dunes. So this, in a sense, what he sees and experiences is something yet to be experienced. So his dream, in that sense, is prophetic as to what he'll experience. Well, he finds himself, at dawn comes, and he sees the most prominent plant is this tree. So he goes over, there's fruit. He takes a bite, it's spectacular stuff. So he looks around, I think, expecting to see his wife. Ah, there she is over there. She's at the stream. So he beckons to her, and the two younger sons come over. They do. They come over, they partake of the fruit. Then he looks around, I think, expecting to see the two older sons. Ah, there they are. Come over. They refuse. What this dream consists of is a family moving through the desert. Even if the night is dark, there's no moon, there's enough starlight out there, and the floor of the desert is bright enough that Sariah, following behind Lehi, 25, 30, 50 yards behind, with the camels that are loaded and the two younger sons with her, she and they can see him walking against the glare of the stars off the desert. And the two older sons are the rear guard. That's how this goes. One clear example of this is to look at the description of the movement of the Israelite tribes through the desert as recounted in the book of Numbers. There was a very set order, and the most precious things, the most important part of the cargo, was kept in the middle of this moving van of people. That happened to be the tent, the sacred tent, and all of the sacred objects that went with this movable temple. And so it is with Lehi's family. They're moving. Sarai and the younger boys have charge of the goods that they're carrying with them, tents, food, tools, so on. And the two older boys are the rear guard. Um, uh, they're, they're traveling by night. This is not part of Joseph Smith's world. There's nobody in upstate New York who says, okay, let's go over, to the next county. We'll leave at 8 o'clock tonight. That doesn't happen, okay? But in Lehi's world, it does. This little story will illustrate it. Years ago, I landed in Aswan, Egypt, way upriver, and I was met and taken by a couple of young guys to my hotel. On the way into town, I discovered that one of these guys is a Bedouin. So I decided that he's going to give me some interesting answers to some questions. So I asked him, how far is it from Aswan to Abu Simbel? Abu Simbel is a archaeological site which was saved by the United Nations back in the 1960s. And all kinds of people go out there. Some drive. It's a long way out there. It's probably 100 kilometers or more. And but the best way to get there is to fly and then fly back to Aswan. So I asked him, how far is it to Abu Simbel from here? He thought for a few seconds and he said, 4 nights. Now, that's a different answer from what Joseph Smith would think, or anybody in his world. But it's not a strange answer for somebody like Lehi, whose dream takes place at night, which is the natural time to travel. You don't travel during the day when the heat is unbearable. You sleep during the day. Besides that, in chapter 17, verse 13, the Lord is quoted there as saying, I will also be your light in the wilderness. I suspect this is something that came off the Liahona. But the Lord made that promise. You ask yourself, light? Why do I need light? I don't if I'm traveling during the day, but if I'm going at night, I need some help. So the Lord is going to be their guide and their light as they go into the desert. So all of this is a world that fits in the ancient Near East. This dream fits in the ancient Near East. One of the little tiny piece, along the way in his dream, Lehi sees this great and spacious building. And he says it's as though it's standing above the earth. Farther south in Arabia, people built buildings to live in. The United Nations actually has identified some of these places that are hundreds of years old. They've tried to maintain them as part of the cultural heritage of the earth. But the idea is that the bottom level is for the animals. The whole complex, there may be 2 or 3 or 4 buildings that are part of a complex, is surrounded by a protective wall. And then the families live in the upstairs. And these things go up to 8 stories high. So that approaching them at night, say in the early evening or something like that, what you see are lights in the windows that are suspended in the air. So the idea is that the architecture of what Lehi will see will match what he sees in his dream. The way I read Lehi's dream, it's a prophetic anticipation of what he will see and experience as his party moves south into the Arabian desert. They will experience all of these things that he sees in his dream. The river, as Nephi describes it in chapter 15, he says, my father didn't see that the river was filthy. He says he was so much caught up in the vision, in the dream, that he didn't notice that. But it matches what we know about that part of the world, because the seasonal rains will hit the mountains someplace, and then depending on how the watershed is shaped, the water runs off. It's like a hard pan, and it runs off down into these rivulets and gathering more and more, and it just comes rushing and gushing out of these wadis, and that's the description of what we see. As so, the water carries a lot of soil when it comes out of these places, making it muddy looking, and that's what Nephi sees. Joseph Smith doesn't live around rivers that are what we'd call filthy or full of mud, except maybe during spring runoff in some places. Most of them are the kind of river that would be fairly clear as a stream.